Well, ladies and gentlemen, hi, how are ya? I know it's been a while. We've been doing a lot of things, but tonight we're at a really interesting thing. The Church of Bubbles doesn't usually go to organized events, and everybody here is like dressed nice and stuff. Here we are in Whitby, Ontario. The Bubble Bus doing its thing. Blowing the bubbles into the air, and we're going to take you inside and show you what's going on. This is the Canadian Democratic something or other. I've never been to something like this, but should be fun. It's just you and me tonight. So we'll go in and see what's going on. All right. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna put the phone away and I'm gonna put it back in when I get in. I'm still here. The camera. Check this out. So we're gonna get you guys hooked up here in just a second. Hang on. We're in. We're gonna show you. I've never been to something like this. This is really cool. All right, hang on. This is what politicians and stuff do. I don't know, man. All right, here we go. Hey, buddy. Waiting for it to fill in here. I don't know what time it starts. It's now 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Good looking group of people. I think they might need us up there blowing some bubbles. What do you think? Yeah? Nice day. Look at little fancy little reserve seats. Oh, they got like little waters and stuff. Whoa. Hey, what's the deal with filming in here? Like, we're good to kind of film around? Okay. So here we are at the Canadian Democratic something or other. It's 7:04. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you, man. So you folks outside. Yeah. Good. Thanks, man. Yeah, I gotta blow the bubbles. Keep these things light, you know? Yeah, man. Good to see you. Have a good night. Well, I figured we'd come and check it out.
Yeah.
The swanky booth like this.
Yeah, I know. That's like a perfect time for this.
You know, I'm expecting the champagne.
I know.
So we're here. Tonight there's going to be a conversation between JFK Jr. and a doctor. And there's, I think Ezra Levant is somehow involved here tonight. So we'll let you have a look around and enjoy the sights. This stuff fascinates me, man. I don't even know what it is, but it looks like they know what they're doing. I wonder if we can sneak a seat somewhere up close. I bet you this guy let me have a seat.
But she doesn't.
How you doing, brother?
Doing good.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. You good? You come to film too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Film?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Good to see you, man. You got two seats? I sit here for a bit?
Oh yeah,
It's okay,
sure.
Just for a bit? Yeah. So, what do you know about tonight?
It will be a famous
What I think is probably one of the most pressing issues of our entire time.
But it was this idea that the government existed to serve the citizens, not the other way around.
So we can remind Kenyans that you have been always the lions.
Why, as a nurse recently asked, do the protected need to be protected from the unprotected by forcing the unprotected to use the protection that did not protect the protected in the first place?
When the government gets out of their lane, sparks fly. Get back in your lane.
Mainstream media, all the governing parties and all the opposition parties are in unanimity here. No media, no lawyers, no law professors, no academics, no professors, no courts, not a single judge in this whole country has stood up this in 2 years.
Back it up with the facts. You saw me night after night if you ever watched with the documents, and I say here they are. Limited government is what allows people to prosper. And yet, in every country, government grows.
Politics should be the least important part of most people's lives. The least important.
We are stewards in the eyes of God for this precious nation, and we're called to contend, to take responsibility.
Welcome to the Civil Liberties Rally. Come on, give some praise. Because we're here to defend freedom in this country. There are forces that want to turn us into a COVID socialist nation, but tonight we gather here to say no. This country is for freedom. We have a Bill of Rights. We have a Declaration of Rights and Freedoms, and no one can take it away from us. And yes, we're here to fight for our rights, for my rights, for your rights, but most importantly, we're here to fight against this socialist movement that wants to take away the rights of our children. They want to force them to be masked, even in kindergarten at the age of 5. Come on, shame on them. They want to force and check our children with unproven substances. And tonight we have one of the greatest warriors fighting for children, Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr. Come on, for my children, and then we're expecting, my son's here, and my daughter-in-law, she's expecting a baby boy next month. And this is my first grandson. And I must fight for him. And you must fight for him. And yes, we are taught to love one another, to care for one another, but even more strongly that if anyone offends or violates our children, then we are taught to fight vigorously. And tonight we're here for this case to fight against the challenges that our children face. I mean, it's spectacular. Things that we never dreamt of growing up, our children face from the internet, from these things, from everything, from the fake news to indoctrination, radical teaching, and here we are tonight to partner with a guy like RFK Jr. to fight for the sake of children. And I commend you for coming. I'm Charles.
This is happening in Whitby, Ontario.
So I'm opening these doors to you. This is your place. We are all part of one family. And it's a big family. And thousands of people online, by the way. And really, it's just a great honor to stand here with you. And I'm going to ask you to stand. And we are going to sing the national anthem, and I want you to sing it like you're defending it, because if I sing it, the room will clear. But I want you to stand and sing it like you mean this, because our children and our children's children depend on you singing the national anthem and acting it out to defend this great country of Canada. So sing with me.
My seat's right there.
One of the greatest warriors for freedom in this country is Ezra Levant. He's the founder of Revolutions, the founder of the Democracy Fund. He is, I think, the greatest journalist in this country. Now, with all the fake news out there, he may be the only journalist in this country. But I think we should nominate him for a Pulitzer Prize, don't you? I mean, this man, he gives such spectacular coverage of the Freedom Convoy. I mean, over 1 million viewers on that alone. He is blazing a trail. He is a general for freedom in this country. And I want you to stand again, and I want you to give a standing applause, a good welcome to this platform to Ezra Levin.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Great to see you. Thank you for being here. Well, it's a very exciting night tonight. It's always great to have a democracy fund get together. I love the fact that people care about civil liberties. Too many people who said they cared about civil liberties have been hibernating for the last 2 years. You are out in force. I want to say a special thank you to our host this evening, Dr. Charles McBeady and his family. It's great to be here today, but in many ways it was even better to be here in the months past, where all other gatherings were closed to us, but we found a way to legally be here and gather and talk about the political crisis. And I thank you for that hospitality and for not being part of cancel culture and deplatforming. It's a wonderful facility. I just love this room. Thanks to the staff that do such a great job on the visual. Well, the keynote event is about 10 minutes away. It's our friend Dr. Julie Ponesi, the pandemic ethics scholar of the Democracy Fund, in conversation with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And I have to say, it's an unusual thing for people who I think would generally call themselves conservative to host an event and come out in great numbers for a liberal icon like RFK Jr. But I think it speaks to what's been happening over the last 2 years. I think that labels, especially party labels, that worked in 2019 might not work in 2021, 2022 anymore. Let me give you an example. People who voted for the Green Party have probably said in Canada, hang on, my party used to be about natural wellness and fitness and skepticism of Big Pharma. Why did my party sign on so wholeheartedly to this Big Pharma mandatory injection? That's not very Green Party, is it? People who in the past identified as New Democrats. Well, New Democrats came from the party of the unions, the party of the working men. But union after union agreed with the boss, agreed with the company to inject into the collective agreement a mandatory vaccination that was not bargained for. And we recently learned that the president of the largest private sector union in Canada, Jerry Diaz, took a $50,000 bribe from a COVID company to promote that. So all these labor union workers who gave up their personal right to negotiate, it's called collective bargaining, they depended on the boss. Well, the boss sold them out. As they say, if the union and the company are saying the same thing, one of them is not necessary. So a lot of NDPers felt like their party betrayed them, and their unions too, frankly. And what is the essential value of the Liberal Party, more than anything? I think 2-3 years ago, they would have said, my body, my choice. Now, they were talking perhaps about abortion, but does not the principle apply? Physical autonomy is between me and my doctor. It's none of your business. Keep your hands off of me. Where did the my body, my choice Liberal Party go when it came to forced injections? And I used to be someone long ago who called himself a Conservative Party member. Well, for 2 years, the Conservatives couldn't clap hard enough or agree fast enough to the greatest growth in government size, scope, power, and invasiveness ever seen in Canada. The greatest civil liberties bonfire where governments, including governments that called themselves conservative, put everyone under house arrest, said who you could or couldn't have over to your own home. So, to this day, there are emergency laws that are still in effect or ready to be sprung back. So whether you were a Green Party, a New Democrat, a liberal, or a conservative, all of us have been made homeless politically if we cared about freedom, privacy, the right to make personal decisions in our own interests and those of our family, rather than have those decisions made by someone far away who doesn't know us. And so I put it to you that the historical use of the word right wing or left wing, it doesn't really work in 2022 the way it worked in 2019. Would you agree with me on that? That's why I'm so excited that the Democracy Fund is hosting a conversation with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., an icon of liberal America, from a family that's as close to royalty as the United States allows. And there's a man who withstood tremendous political pressure, didn't cave in. The peer pressure from the establishment to conform must have been mighty. And for him to stay firm is admirable. I don't care where you are on the political spectrum. You have to see the pressure that was on that man to bend, and he did not bend. And the pressure on him to conform, and he did not conform. And I can tell you that is the hardest thing in the world, to be a principled dissident. It's hard when you've got nothing or very little to lose. They say when a man has nothing left to lose, he's strong. That may be true. But imagine if you're someone with as much to lose as Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and yet you hold firm. That's admirable. I look forward to the conversation very much. And there's no one who'll do a better job of it than Dr. Jr. A moment ago, I took the time to reread Section 2 of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I recommend you do the same. It's not hard to find. You can find it on Google pretty quick. Section 2 is called Fundamental Freedoms, which is a higher status than the other freedoms in our charter. So these are the special ones. These are the strategic freedoms upon which all the others are built. The right to vote is not a fundamental freedom in our Constitution. Isn't that funny? But the right to free speech is, the right to freedom of thought, and it makes sense, because what use is the right to vote if you don't have freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of association? They had votes in Cuba. They had votes in Saddam Hussein's Iraq. But if they didn't have the fundamental freedoms, it meant nothing. And I encourage you to read. There's only a list of 4 of them. The first one is conscience and religion. Think about it. It starts inside your mind. Conscience, religion. That comes first. Then, the next one is thought, belief, opinion, expression in the media. And it makes sense because you have to be able to think. You have to have your conscience and your religion. Then you can express it, you can think it, you can give your opinions. Then the third one is freedom of assembly, what we're doing here tonight. And the final one is freedom of association, your right to be together. I put it to you that these 4 fundamental freedoms have been neglected in Canada. And this is not just an idle statement on my part. I am deeply disappointed to tell you that in the last 2 years, those fundamental freedoms I've just listed, which are the heart of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, none of them have stopped this government overreach. There's not been a single court in this country, not a single judge who has in any meaningful way stopped the lockdownism, stopped the bonfire of our civil liberties. We need to rekindle an understanding and a belief and a commitment. It's not enough to have these words on a piece of paper. The Soviet Union had a constitution on a piece of paper too. China has laws on a piece of paper too, but if you don't have the philosophy of freedom and the belief and the commitment of freedom, it means nothing. So what I'm hoping we see is a new coalition for civil liberties. People who in the past may have saw themselves at odds with each other. Liberals, conservatives, New Democrats, Greens, whatever. But who believe that we must rediscover and rededicate ourselves to those principles. And that is the purpose of the Democracy Fund, and we'll be hearing more from it tonight. But let me stop myself now, and without further ado, give way to the main event tonight. Let me introduce to you the woman who will be hosting the conversation next with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. If you've come to any of our events before, you know her, Dr. Julie Pinessi, who was a professor of ethics at Western University until she herself became a test of ethics. Do you give up your choices, your rights, your autonomy because you're being put under duress? Do you give in to force? Do you give in to bullying, to peer pressure, or do you stand on principle? She stood on principle. The whole world saw that viral video of her standing on principle, teaching one last ethics lesson to her classes. What a pleasure and honor it is that she is the Pandemic Ethics Scholar of the Democracy Fund and the host of our evening tonight. Join me in welcoming my friend, Dr. Julie Pinessi.
For being here, and thank you, Ezra, for that lovely introduction. You know, if you want to be introduced by anyone, you want to feel good about yourself, he's the guy to do it. You know, Ezra mentioned that we have these fundamental freedoms in our Constitution, and that they are more important than all the other ones because they kind of have a fulcrum for freedom. Without them, we can't exercise or even begin to think about how to exercise the other ones, like the right to vote. And I think you could actually make the argument that one of those is the most fundamental of the four, and that is freedom of speech. Because if you lose that, you lose the ability to defend, to fight for all of the other ones. And I think actually, if you lose the ability to speak, you start to lose the ability to have free thought. And so that's why events like this are so important. It's why coming together and exchanging ideas freely is so important, and so grateful to Robert Kennedy for joining us and helping to make that possible tonight. But before we get to that, I just want to mention a couple of things. You know, one of the things that is so we're losing by the day in Canada is this right to speak our mind, to exchange ideas, and just to ask questions about things. And the Democracy Fund is making that possible in so many different ways. One of the things they did for me, they made possible, was the ability to write a book. And I can't tell you, the experience of writing a book in 2021 in Canada felt nothing like what I thought it would feel like. It felt taboo some days, and other days like I was doing something illegal. Like it's not something our government would approve of, or many of the citizens would approve of. But organizations like the Democracy Fund create the space that makes that possible. They also make evenings like tonight possible. And something else you might not know very much about is that we also have a legal arm, and we have a couple of our lawyers here tonight to tell you a little bit about, just a few minutes, a little bit about the cases that they're working on. And you know, our lawyers, every day, they work so hard to defend the rights of Canadians to engage in peaceful protest, the right of Canadians to remain at university or college, regardless of what their personal opinions are, and the right of people to keep their jobs, even if they disagree with their employers ideologically. And so I'm very happy tonight to be joined by two of our lawyers, Mark Joseph and Alan Homer, who is our acting litigation director. So please join me in welcoming Alan and Mark.
I'd like to just tell you a little bit about some of the work that TDF Legal is doing. Broadly speaking, we have two types of cases. On the one hand, we have what I would call the complex charter case, and on the other hand, we have the discrete legal issues. Now, the complex charter case usually sees us going to court and asking the judge to strike a law or a policy or an order because it's inconsistent with Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now, I can't go into all of our cases right now, but you can read more about them on our website. And please keep checking because we're updating it regularly. What I can tell you is that Ezra's right. It's very hard to win these cases, especially in COVID times. But we are going to continue bringing these cases because every time we bring one of these cases, we send a message to the government. And that message is that you are going to have to come into a courtroom and explain why your law is reasonable. And sending that message, it helps keep the government honest, or at least more honest than they otherwise would be. Now, for the second type of case, the discrete legal issues, these are the cases where we help real people with real problems. Right now, we are representing 40 people who have been criminally charged because of peaceful activity associated with convoy protests in Ottawa and Windsor. My colleague Adam is in court almost every single day fighting for these people. We have dozens of other cases, criminal cases, from BC to the Maritimes, in which we're defending people who have been criminally charged because of COVID-related activity. And lastly, before I hand this mic over to my colleague Mark, remiss of me if I didn't tell you about our hard-working team of paralegals. These folks are handling over 2,000 tickets from across the country. In Ontario, we have over 1,300 cases alone. These are people who didn't mask when they were supposed to mask, or who didn't quarantine when they were supposed to quarantine, or who gathered when gatherings weren't permitted. But this is a great team, and they have a good strategy, and I'm confident in them. And let me turn the mic over to my colleague Mark.
Thank you. As Alan mentioned, my name is Mark Joseph. I'm Senior Litigation Counsel at TDF. I'll keep this brief because no one has ever said, wow, I can't wait to hear what the lawyer has to say. So, as you probably know, TDF helps people with access to justice when their civil liberties have been infringed. We do this, for example, by representing university students who have been denied their educational services due to vaccine mandates, or teachers and nurses who have been sanctioned by their associations for speaking on controversial topics. And I think we're all here because of a belief that governments are regulating parts of our lives that were previously free of interference. And this isn't, as Ezra mentioned, or shouldn't be, a partisan issue, since laws enacted by one party that encroach on freedoms will inevitably be used by another party when they take power. As the late, great Christopher Hitchens said, when you infringe on civil liberties, it's always the case that you make a rod for your own back. Over the past 2 years, people in the Western worlds have seen governments move further along a spectrum of control, from lockdowns to fines to vaccine mandates, and now debanking. That's the newest. And soon, it'll be digital censorship. Each of these measures has been more severe than the last. And each encroachment on civil liberties must be fought because, or since surrendering one makes it easier for the governments to take the next. So TDF will continue to fight, and if you want to help in the fight, you can follow us on Twitter at TDF_can, or donate it to marchthefund.ca, and with that, I'll hand it back to Dr. Panetsky.
Yeah, I got you on the audio. I'm going to take off the case, and then maybe the audio will be better.
You know, I don't think it would be an overstatement to say that the last 3 years have been some of the toughest of our lives. For many, they have been filled not just with fear and loss and brokenness and loneliness, but also a kind of uncertainty and instability that makes us question everything and everyone we thought we could rely on. But as dystopian as all of this is, there is a silver lining to it, which for me has been seeing people who somehow have the integrity of thought and the courage to stand by their conviction, even when it means standing out from the crowd in order to bring a little bit of sanity and moral conscience to a world which seems to be just going mad by the day. These are people who are saying, we aren't going to stand by and watch while our families are torn apart, while our children's futures are stolen. We're not going to allow our governments to terrorize us indefinitely. And we won't be ushered into a world in which we no longer have the right to think for ourselves. While we have seen some of the worst forms of human behavior in our highest offices, and unfortunately from closest to us, we have also seen people from all walks of life demonstrate incredible courage when faced with the toughest moral tests. There is perhaps no one who was in this fight earlier, or who fights it so bravely or endures ridicule so stably and elegantly than tonight's guest, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Former Senator and U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, and of course, nephew of President John F. Kennedy. Robert Kennedy Jr. is part of a family that helped to shape a world in which we had the luxury of taking freedom for granted. Mr. Kennedy is a graduate of Harvard University, the London School of Economics, and the University of Virginia. He negotiated the New York City Watershed Agreement, was senior attorney for the Natural Resources Defense Council and chief prosecuting attorney for the Hudson Riverkeeper. And for his success leading the fight to restore the Hudson River, he was named Time Magazine's one of the heroes for the planet. Mr. Kennedy is also chief legal counsel and chairman of the board of the Children's Health Defense, a nonprofit organization aiming to end childhood health epidemics. He is a best-selling author with many times over, with books on the New York Times bestseller list, including Crimes Against Nature, American Values, Lessons I Learned from My Family, and most recently, the one you're probably most familiar with, The Real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Democracy and Public Health. He has also had articles appear in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and Rolling Stone. And you probably didn't know this, but Mr. Kennedy is also a children's book author, a licensed master faulconer, and a whitewater paddling enthusiast, having led several expeditions in Canada and Latin America as fearlessly, I imagine, as he defends the environment and our children. This is who Robert Kennedy is on paper, but my experience has been that not even a resume as laudatory as this can reveal all, or even the most interesting things about a person. So it is my absolute honor to have the chance to sit down tonight and have a more intimate chat with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Please join me in welcoming tonight's guest.
please, can I have some advice from you, because I was under the impression that this was going to be a Q&A, or should I begin by making a statement? The instructions I got was I was supposed to answer questions.
I have questions for you. Can I ask you questions?
I'll do anything you want.
Let's do that. Do you know what? I have the feeling that they are so happy to see you. They would just be happy with that to go home or something. Do you know, I mean, there's so many things that our audience would love to hear your opinion about. I have so many things to ask you about. And I don't want to talk exclusively about COVID tonight, because I think there are so many things going on in our world. But let's start there anyway. I mean, now we're into the third year, right, since the World Health Organization declared the pandemic. And we're no better off, are we? And by many calculations, we're an awful lot worse off. We've had these lockdowns and vaccine mandates and mask mandates, and our families are torn apart, and society is more destabilized than it's been for so long. And now you can be an infected, vaccinated person and keep your job and show your vaccine passport to get into a restaurant, while an uninfected, unvaccinated person is getting fired and until very recently had to go and get takeout. You know, this is the world in which we live. Could you have imagined 3 years ago that we would have gotten here?
No, I could not. And a couple of things I would say for starter. One is to apologize for my voice. I have this condition called spasmodic dysphonia that makes my voice cracky like this. And I had a very, very strong voice until I was 42 years old, and then I got this disease. But usually, good news is it usually clears up a little after I talk. So I apologize to the audience for how it sounds, at least in the beginning, and I hope it clears up. The other thing I would say is that before I got into the vaccination, and even stop overlapping, I spent about 37 years as an environmental lawyer, working for Waterkeeper Alliance on the Hudson, but on 350 other waterways. And we have very, very strong programs in Canada, Lake Ontario Lakekeeper, the Fraser Riverkeeper, and waterkeepers all over Canada. And I got to work in every province of Canada. During that time, I spent about 20% of my time in Canada working on environmental issues, litigating against Canadian and U.S. companies for polluting the environment. I represented many of the tribal nations, the Cree, Northern Quebec, the Nuu-chah-nulth, and 5 other tribes on Vancouver Island, negotiations with McMillan Hotel. And it was a great, great pleasure, probably the greatest joy of my career that I could just spend so much time in Canada with the nations I really love. In answer to your question, I could not imagine how we got to where we are today. In 2001, we passed the Patriot Act in our country, and my political party, the Democratic Party, fought against it. My uncle, Ted Kennedy, fought against it. It was really this dream of the neocons to pursue this vision of the U.S. global hegemony after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and in the process to turn America into a national security state, into essentially a police state. There were tremendous restrictions on constitutional rights, and it was a huge blow that it passed ultimately. It passed in the wake of the fear and the orchestrated fear following 9/11. But at least we knew that most Americans, when they, in retrospect, opposed the polling, all showed that in my political party, there was huge is that liberals, particularly, have collaborated with this dismantling that you spoke about, that happened in Canada and the U.S. and liberal democracy globally, and it's kind of lockstep assault, a coup d'etat, a global coup d'etat against liberal democracy around the globe. And we saw in the United States the destruction in the last 20 months of virtually all the amendments to the United States Constitution. As you point out, most, the beginning blow was the censorship, blanket censorship we see on social media and media against any voice that challenges official orthodoxies or official proclamations. That they're deplatformed, marginalized, gaslighted, doctors are delicensed, the scientists are defunded, politicians are disappeared, and journalists are also, they're denied any kind of platform to talk about this. They began with the first, and Madison, Hamilton, and Adams all said, we put freedom of speech in the First Amendment because, as you just said, Mr. Police, it is the most important right. If you take away a citizen's capacity to criticize their government, it gives the government license for virtually any atrocity. And as soon as they got rid of, and also democracies rely on the free flow of information, on the triumph of ideas in the marketplace of ideas, so that the best ideas can become government policy. And to eliminate that, you really kind of eliminate the major assumption of democracy that you're going to have a marketplace for debate. And we saw that once they got rid of freedom of speech, they went after, in our country, freedom of religion. They closed every church in the United States of America for a year with no public hearing, no scientific citation, nobody ever showing that it was going to impede the spread or the speed of the spread of the virus if we closed those churches. And in the meantime, kept the liquor stores open as essential businesses. Now, I have nothing against that. Liquor stores are not the United States Constitution, and churches are. And there is no pandemic exception in the United States Constitution, and the framers knew about a pandemic because during the Revolutionary War, there were two pandemics bedeviled the Patriot forces. The armies of New England, Washington's armies were sidelined for almost 2 months because of the smallpox outbreak. And the Army of Virginia, which was the other major army, was devastated by a malaria epidemic. So they knew all about it, but they opted not to put that in the United States Constitution as an exception to our Bill of Rights. And they got rid of the right to assembly by passing all these social distancing mandates again, without due process, with no science, no hearing, no public hearing, no environmental impact statement, no demonstration of the science that this would actually be a beneficial mandate. They then got rid of freedom, they got rid of the property rights. They closed 3.3 million businesses in our country with no due process and no just compensation, which provided for the Fourth Amendment. They got rid of jury trials. They passed the CARES Act and the PrEP Act. Here's what the Seventh Amendment says: no American citizen shall be deprived of his right to a trial before a jury of his peers in any case or controversy exceeding $25 in value. That's all it says. It's very simple. There is no exception. and if somebody harms you, you are entitled to a jury trial. Well, the legislature's not allowed to override that. You need a constitutional amendment. But here we had Tony Fauci, who has been in that office for 50 years, who has never been elected. He has no democratic accountability, and he simply said, we're going to close every business in America. He didn't show a single scientific study to justify that. It turned out to be a globally have global implications because we were setting policy in our country that everybody out around the globe. There's no public hearings anywhere. It was simply ordered. We got rid of all of these prohibitions that we have against track and trace surveillance, against warrantless searches and seizures, all of these new intrusions on our privacy. And we got rid of due process of law. Here's what the United States Constitution said. If you want to pass a law in the country, and the legislature votes on the law, then that's all they need to do. They vote on it, and it's law. And the remedy for that, if you don't like that law, is to vote out that legislature. But there are special democratic controls when a regulatory agency passes a regulation. Because Congress and the courts have said they can't do that. You can't have unelected bureaucrats imposing laws on people without democratic controls. So there's a process, and for 40 years, I've been suing public agencies, and I've been suing big polluters who are trying to escape that process, trying to do end runs around that process. And here's what that process is. Before a regulator passes a law or passes a regulation, promulgates a regulation, they have to publish the proposed rule in a newspaper of record and other newspapers all around the country, so that it's highly likely that anybody affected by the rule will see it reported in a newspaper. Number two, they have to publish an environmental impact statement, a regulatory impact statement, an economic impact statement that lays out all the scientific studies, all the economic studies, and does a cost-benefit analysis that shows that the cost benefits of that regulation will exceed the cost. It also has to demonstrate that there are no alternatives that are cheaper or less burdensome. None of that was done. Next thing they do is they have to have a public comment period. Anybody who is impacted by those laws has to send a letter and then commenting on it, and the government has to respond to every one of those comments. Oh, if you're a kayak company, let's say, and you write a comment that says, listen, the mandate should not be applied to my company because if I make my clients wear masks while they're kayaking, it's highly likely they will drown. And the government then has to respond and explain why it either is making an exception from that business or that we're justifying it. None of that was done. And then they have to have a public hearing where Tony Fauci brings in all of his experts that he relied on and lays out all the science that he relied on. And then we get to bring our experts and we get to cross-examine his experts. And there's a decision by a neutral administrative law judge that is based on the evidence. It can't be arbitrary and capricious, and you can appeal that decision. So there's all these democratic controls. None of that happened. You just had one guy who's never been elected, who just says, 1 week he says masks don't work. They're ridiculous. And then 2 weeks later, he says everybody strap one on. He never gives us a scientific basis, a scientific citation. He just says, I've changed my mind. And then 2 weeks after that, he says, put 2 of them on. But that's a complete obliteration of democratic process. The only amendment that they didn't touch was the Second Amendment. all the other ones were essentially dismantled. We saw American democracy dismantled in this single year. What I said to people is, you know, we need to understand that there are worse things than dying. Okay? There are worse things than dying. And that's a hard thing for people to understand. But one of those things will cost us freedom. 1776. Who said that? And we are living with the Bill of Rights because they were willing to lay down their lives, their property, their families, everything they owned, everything they had, including their existence, in order to make sure that we had these rights in the Bill of Rights. And now, in 20 months, because of the fear of the germ, we've given up all this rights, we've relinquished them.
Well, this is the thing that's so shocking, right? I mean, it's one thing for someone like Anthony Fauci to assume a kind of authoritarian control, but that wouldn't accomplish what we've seen happen over the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, the point you're making, I think, is that it's people's fear that have allowed them to do whatever he and people like him have said. And one thing I think is becoming clear in the narrative is that people feel as though they have a right to feel safe, right? A right to be protected from other people, but even just a right to feel that they're safe from other people. Is there any notion in your mind in a democracy that we have any kind of right like that?
Well, I don't disagree that people ought to feel safe. The question is, really, I think the real issue is the issue that you alluded to, which is that people gave up this power, this essential power to be sovereign over our own lives, or our conduct, or our community, as a result of orchestrated fear. And I show in my book how the data very big and manipulated in order to keep people in a constant state of fear.
I'm sorry.
And Franklin Roosevelt was the father of liberal democratic ideology in our country. Probably the most important statement, the most well-known statement in his litany of wonderful wisdom was his admonition to the American people that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. The reason he said that was because he understood that fear is a tool that totalitarian elements use to impose autocratic systems on democratic populations to disable our capacity for critical thinking and induce people to retreat to the safety of a strong leadership, a man on the right course who presents himself as the only path to survival is to follow orders blindly and directly. And that doesn't work in a democracy. And what Roosevelt was watching at that time was the fear of the economic depression in the 1930s, which had been used by totalitarian leaders across Europe and really across the world, in Spain and Italy and Germany. You had the rise of fascism in those countries, and in the Soviet Union and a lot of Eastern Europe, Yugoslavia, etc. You had the rise of a different kind of totalitarianism, which was communism. But all of them were using the same formulas, the same algorithms of demagoguery to get people to voluntarily relinquish their Bill of Rights. Hitler did not take power by force. Germany was the most democratic country in Europe at that time, and the most highly educated people. But using fear, he was able to disable their connections to their strongest and most deeply held values. And that's what Roosevelt was alluding to, that fear, because at that time in the United States, there was about 50% of our country were completely disillusioned with democracy and capitalism. They thought capitalism had failed, democracy had failed, we had to find a different system, and yet here we are with 30% of the vote who was proposing a kind of, communist type socialist populism, and you had Father Kaufman, who was more right-wing populism, and you had a majority of American people at that time who were looking for other systems. And Roosevelt said, no, we're going to hold democracy together, and we're going to reform capitalism so that it serves the people. And you need to trust me, you need to stay with me, you need to participate in our democracy, and we need to go forward together. And stop, and don't stop thinking. You need to keep your mind open and your critical thinking skills honed. And that's what he was telling the American people to do, because fear is an instrumentality of totalitarianism, and we saw it this past year wielded by people that we trust, people like President Trudeau, to impose systems that are completely antithetical to any kind of liberal tradition.
You know, on the topic of fear, I mean, I think it's very easy to see once that settles into an individual or a population, how it dislodges, as you say, critical thinking and distorts your perception and affects the kind of decisions you make, economic, psychological, moral. But one thing that I think we're also seeing is that people don't want to give up fear. I mean, living in fear, in some sense, is a terrible way to live. And we know that there are physical correlates to this, and we have high blood pressure, and the physical effects of stress, and you're not really enjoying your life, you're not happy. And it's not good to live in fear, or so we would think. And yet, it's been very clear, I think, throughout the pandemic, that when you try to present evidence to someone who is in this state of fear, that should assuage their fears, that should make them feel a little less afraid. And if you say things like, well, we have a pretty good set of pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals that treat COVID, or, the numbers aren't as bad for your age group as you seem to think, or none of this information seems to be met with anything other than anger. So I can't help but wonder, what do you think about this? Do you think that people in some sense like living in fear? Is it part of human nature to like something about that? Do we lose something if we give it up?
I don't think so. The way that I understand it is that the mechanisms for imposing orthodoxy are hardwired into the human neural systems, and they were hardwired into us during the 20,000 generations that human beings were wandering the African savanna in tiny groups, warring with their neighbors and struggling for survival. And the ones that survived were the ones that followed a strong leader, that they ascribed to a kind of a unified cosmology that gave them unit cohesion, which is the very potent weapon in war. And they saw people who were outside of that cohesive unit, outside of that belief system, as intractable enemies who were not even really human, who could be killed. And that people inside, anybody inside, no matter what their defects, they should be excused and overlooked. And that anybody from the outside was guilty no matter what they did. And it shuts off. Part of the mechanism of orthodoxy is that it shuts off critical thinking. It shuts off your capacity to use logic to build bridges with the rest of humanity. So if somebody approaches you with a logical argument, to you they look like an enemy. They can't be listened to, they can't be debated. They have to be silenced. And the intelligence agencies and the other, elements of what I would call totalitarian elements, the people who study how to manipulate large populations, know exactly how to play on that hardwired system. The CIA, one of the things that I do in my book, and I really discovered for writing this book, and it's in the last chapter, which I think is the most important chapter of the book, and I talk about this event, which is event 201. And most people, your audience probably knows about this. You can still shockingly look it up on YouTube. But it was a tabletop simulation of a coronavirus pandemic that was done in October of 2019. So think about that date, October 2019. We first heard about coronavirus on January 1st, 2020. And then the pandemic was declared by the WHO in March of 2020. But this is October 2019, but the intelligence agencies tell us that the coronavirus almost certainly escaped from the Wuhan lab prior to September 12th, 2019. How do we know that? Probably late August or early September. How do we know that? Well, here's how. Here's why the intelligence agencies think that. On the evening of September 12th, the Chinese military kicked down the door of the Wuhan lab and went in and changed the management, put a military commander in charge of the lab, removed 22,000 coronavirus samples that were on publicly interfacing websites and got rid of them, so nobody's seen them since. They also took most of the major gain-of-function studies out of the publicly facing websites. The satellite imagery shows that the 6 hospitals in Wuhan, the parking lots were more filled than they've been at any time during the previous 6 years. There were technicians from the lab who in the next 2 weeks went to the hospital with coronavirus symptoms. There was chatter on the internet all that day, September 12th, and escalated thereafter about masks and about the symptoms of diarrhea or respiratory infections, and about the other symptoms that we now associate with COVID. And there were a number of other things that happened then. And over the next month, during the military games, and made the intelligence agencies believe that the Chinese government knew of the escape beginning in September 12th. So a month later, you have this tabletop simulation in New York City at the Pierre Hotel. And who are the funders? The funders are Johns Hopkins University Security Center, which is funded by Bill Gates and NIH. The World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are funding a coronavirus pandemic that killed 6 million people on the planet. The people who are attending the event are high-level ambassadors from the social media companies, from the major media companies, from the pharmaceutical industry, Johnson & Johnson, the biggest pharmaceutical companies, and from the military and big corporate PR firms. The hosts are Bill Gates, April Haynes, who is the former deputy director of the CIA. Why is the CIA at a public health simulation? The CIA doesn't do public health. The CIA does coup d'etats. The CIA has been involved in 73 coup d'etats between 1947 and 2000. So that's a third of the countries on Earth. Why are they hosting a coronavirus pandemic simulation? The other peculiar person who was there as one of the hosts is George Kao, who is the head of the Chinese CDC. George Kao clearly knows that there is a coronavirus pandemic already happening. And that day, they do 4 simulations. And if you have time to look at it, you should look at the 4th one, because they spend the entire time talking about how to censor, how to get the social media sites to censor information that is contrary to government proclamations. Particularly, and this is what George Kao is pushing the entire time, again and again, he's saying we've got to shut people up if they start saying that this came from a lab leak. Oh, it is really a peculiar event, and so I spent a lot of time looking at it. What I found out is that this was not a one-off event, that they've been doing this virtually every year since 1999. And around that time, particularly after 2001, after the World Trade Center attack, you remember 3 weeks after the World Trade Center attack, we had an anthrax attack in our country. And it changed the entire U.S. foreign policy so that we adopted officially a biosecurity agenda as the steer-tip of American foreign policy. And the biosecurity agenda is what was reflected across all of the agencies. And they began putting huge amounts of money into bioweapons. Now, we signed a bioweapon treaty in 1972, so we're not allowed to develop or research or stockpile or deploy bioweapons. But there's an exception. You can do the research and the stockpiling if it's for dual use. What does dual use mean? It means defensive uses. It means that when you're developing a bioweapon, you also are developing a vaccine. You cannot deploy any bioweapon without having a vaccine because of the blowback. Because when you release a bioweapon, it's going to come back and infect your own people. So part of the strategy of having a bioweapon is to simultaneously develop a vaccine to give your own people so that you're only killing your enemy. So you're allowed to do the vaccine part because that's looked upon as defensive. So the Pentagon began putting billions of dollars into bioweapons research. But they didn't want to do it themselves because they believed the public would not believe that they were actually interested in vaccines. So they routed that money through Tony Fauci, and they gave him a 68% raise and a $2.2 billion annual budget to do bioweapons research. In 2014, 3 of his bugs escaped, and 300 scientists, leading bioweapons experts in the world in America, Mark Lipsitch from Harvard, Richard E. Wright from Rutgers, wrote a letter to President Obama asking them to shut down Tony Fauci's research because he was going to release a coronavirus that would cause a pandemic. And Obama sent a cease and desist order to Tony Fauci for his 18 projects that he was funding at that time to develop the pandemic superbugs. Fauci defied that order and continued doing the research, but in order to hide the research from the White House, he started doing it, funding scientists to do that research at the Wuhan lab. And he had a U.S. scientist, Ralph Barrett, teach the Chinese military scientists how to develop coronavirus superbugs. How to take the spike protein of the furin cleave and put it into harmless coronaviruses to make them deadly to humans. And he began doing that in 2014. He laundered the money through a British-born zoologist called Peter Daszak that again further hide it from the White House. Now, at the same time, the CIA, everybody knows now that Fauci was funded. What they don't know is the Pentagon, through DARPA and part So well, Fauci was giving millions of dollars, they were giving tens of millions, and the CIA was spending $100 million through USAID. So they were all researching it there, but they were also doing these simulations over here. And the simulations, the things that all these simulations come from, they were secret. They were all orchestrated by the CIA. And there were high-level CIA officials or intel officials, which is the CIA's investment arm, at every one of them. Each one of the simulations, some of them had hundreds of thousands of people. They were doing it simultaneously in the United States, in Canada, and in Europe, and they were involving police, frontline workers, doctors, nurses, hospital systems, utilities, mayors, local leaders, FBI, and CIA, and local police, all of the nations, they were doing it, and they were doing it secretly. And the thing they all have in common with eventual is they never talk about public health. They're not talking about how to get stockpile vitamin D and get it out to the public, and zinc to get out to the public. They're not talking about how to develop repurposed drugs, how to connect all the 11 million physicians, frontline physicians from all over the world to figure out what's working, what are the protocols, what are the drugs that are working in Bangladesh and Zambia, Buenos Aires, and France, and getting that information to the doctors on the front line all over the world. There's nothing like that. There's no discussion about quarantining the sick and protecting the vulnerable. Nobody ever talks about it. Nobody talks about how do you protect constitutional rights during a pandemic. Every one of these simulations is about one thing. How do you use a pandemic to clamp down totalitarian controls and obliterate democracy in liberal democracies across the globe? The name of the series was called Operation Lockstep, because it was a way of training decision makers in nations and all the liberal democracies in the world what they should do in a pandemic, how to use that pandemic to get rid of democracy globally. And they did it again and again and again. And all you have to do, if you read my book, is cite and source. In some cases, you can go and look at these, you can read the transcripts, you can read the script, and it really was, to me, it was a breathtaking discovery. But I've been studying, because my family has had a 70-year battle, fist fight with the CIA. I have written books about it, written articles about it, and about the agency, and about MK Ultra, and all of the mind control experiments over the years that were disclosed during the House Select Committee on Assassination hearings and during Frank Church's hearings during the 70s and 80s. And I got paid a lot of money to get the CIA's manuals, not only for individual mind control, but Operation Artichoke, MK Ultra, also all of the manuals that they use for how to do mass manipulation of populations. And if you look at it, the CIA was studying how to manipulate populations for many, many years in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. They were doing it at 173 universities and research centers in the United States, in Canada, and in Guatemala, including many, many Canadian, very, very prestigious Canadian universities that were involved in it. Sidney Gottlieb, who was their hypnotist and chemist, came out of the Canadian university system. So, if you look at the techniques for mass control, what they were looking at was individual control, hypnosis, psychotropic drugs, isolation, which was the most important, most potent weapon for imposing individual control, and other mechanisms for controlling individuals, but they're also doing population control and how to use propaganda, orchestrate fear, isolate, separate people, liberating economies, separating families, isolating individuals, shattering institutions of the society, and creating chaos and fear to the point where a majority of people would invite a centralized authority and to impose control from above. And that's what they were trying to orchestrate. There's two experiments that I'll just mention here. One is the isolation experiments, which were designed to induce a symptom that we now call Stockholm syndrome. And Stockholm syndrome is a syndrome where you lock people up and they become grateful to their captors. And they believe that the only way to escape alive is complete compliance and obedience to their captors. And they're kept in a constant state of fear and anxiety. They become more and more obliged and compliant to their captors. And also, one of the features of Stockholm syndrome is that people who are locked up become angry with anybody who tries to help them escape. Because they believe those people are jeopardizing their lives. Those people are getting angry with the authorities. That's one of the symptoms that they study. The other thing that I connected for the first time with the CIA in the book is a famous experiment called the Milgram experiment. And Stanley Milgram was a Yale professor. He ended up at City University of New York, working for the former head of MK Ultra, who was his career patron. And Stanley Milgram recruited, as part of this experiment, people from every walk of life in America, students, professors, construction workers, blacks, whites, all kinds of people, business people. And he would bring the people and put them at the subject of the experiment, put them in a room where they would be seated at a table with a dial in front of them that they were told when they turned that dial, it would give an electric shock to a person who was in the next room, who was invisible to them, who was tied to a chair. They couldn't see that person. That person, in fact, was an actor who was a confederate of the study designers of Milgram. And in the room with the subject would be a man in a doctor's outfit. Mainly, it was Stanley Milgram. There were other actors as well, like doctors and other researchers. And the doctor would tell them to give a shock. And the shock, they could hear the person next to them when they turned that out, screaming, crying, pleading, struggling. And most of the people, most all of them, were reluctant to give it a second shot. The doctor would keep telling them, turn it up, turn it down, turn it up, turn it down, getting higher and higher and higher voltage. And in the end, and some of the people, some of the subjects, were actually crying and pleading with Dr. Milgram not to make them do it again. And when he ordered them to do it, they would do it anyhow. And 67%, you can go on Wikipedia and look this up, the Milgram experiment, 67% of the people of the subject's experiment turned the dial up all the way to 450 volts, where it was marked potentially fatal. So, the conclusion that Milgram says is that a figure of authority, particularly when they're dressed as a doctor, can overwhelm people's most deeply held values and judgment. And today, I feel like we're all caught in a massive Milgram experiment. Tony Fauci is the doctor, or the Canadian Health Ministry and authorities, and British Chris Whitty. Each country had one of these doctors who would be telling them, I know what I'm doing, do what you're told. And most of the population do what it's told. I mean, even though it violates their values, even though they're tearing up the Constitution, which everybody knows you don't censor speech, everybody knows you don't close churches, everybody knows you don't ban jury trials, you don't get rid of the right to assembly. You know, you have Justin Trudeau in your country getting rid of the right to petition, like closing the bank accounts of people who have exercised their constitutional rights to assemble and petition government. And everybody knows that's wrong, but they all went along. They all went along with it because the doctor was telling them to do it. And you know, the good news about the milk damage experiment was that 33% of people got up and walked out. And what I would say is the people in this room tonight, you're part of that 33%. To fight back until the rest of the population wakes up and remembers their values and begins joining the revolution.
Well, I was thankful very much for that. What is the way out of this? Because it seems, as you're describing, this psychological experiment en masse, on a global scale, is not only incredibly successful, but I would imagine that those who have orchestrated it are surprised at how successful it has been. And that the people you describe, you know, who are following these public health experts and feeling like they're doing something good and conforming, they don't see that they're doing something bad, right? They see that they are purifying, right? Their family, their loved ones, their country, the human race, whatever it is. And it seems like we have this kind of obsessive focus on purity in our culture these days. And you know, you mentioned the list of the people, the usual suspects, you know, Bill and Melinda Gates and George Cao and Fauci and WEF. And we know that there are so many people like this on a global scale with immense power that are orchestrating these psychological effects that we're seeing every day. Are there people, I have to ask, are there forces on the other side that are fighting against them? And if not, what is our best, a room full of hundreds of people, what is our best strategy? What can we do?
Well, Dr. Madison, what I kind of see is that we're currently in an arms race, and that, you know, these totalitarian forces now have instrumentalities available to them that will give them ultimately total control. So even if you have 80 or 90% of the population revolt, it will matter because the capacity to control us with technology is going to be so overwhelming. And you know, it's been the ambition and the intention of every totalitarian regime in history and time to eliminate all dissent, control every aspect of our behavior, from sexual behavior to creativity, to poetry, to, you know, any form of self-expression, because every form of self-expression ultimately is a form of dissent. And to control our movements, control our money, controlling everything that we do. No system in the world has been able to do that because they simply never had the technology to do it. You know, totalitarian regimes are always really good record keepers because that's the way to control people. But none of them could really have that capacity to have total record keeping and total control. They do that. They have that. I mean, if you look at all of the things that are now being put in place, 5G, I sued the FCC and the FDA on the 5G issue, and we've won that suit, and now they've appealed it. But we've won in the Court of Appeals so far, and because it's so dangerous. And the danger It causes cancer, it causes birth defects, it causes all kinds of immune problems, and it's really, really dangerous, highly, highly toxic. But the point, the reason that they're spending trillions of dollars laying out the 5G, you see these ads on TV that say 5G is about to come to your neighborhood, and there are these glossy ads, and they're exciting, and you watch them and you say, gosh, that's going to be great if finally it's there. My life is finally going to change. I'm finally going to be happy now. I'm not going to find anything about it and say, well, what is it going to do for me? I'm going to be able to download a video game in 2 seconds faster. That's the point. It's not going to do anything for you. It's what it's going to do for them. It's going to allow them to better live cars and an AI. You know that. And Elon Musk himself has said, AI is going to start by stealing your job, and then it's going to kill you. That's what he says about it. He's one of the big promoters of it. But the real purpose of AI, two other purposes, are one, data collection. The corporations and the government have been able to have access to your data for a long time, all of your data, because they're listening to you on your Apple Watch, on your GPS, on your cell phone, through your microwave oven, if it's smart, all your smart devices in your household are listening to you. They know every time you cough, every time you sneeze, they know when you talk about lying in a mattress and in your shoes. All of that data has value, but they have not been able to harvest it until now. But 5G gives them the capacity to harvest it. Everything about you they're going to know. They have total knowledge of everything that you do. And Bill Gates is currently building a city in Arizona, 85,000 people. It is simply one huge data analytics center where they're going to be able to take all of this data. Siri is not working for you. I mean, just using your Apple Watch is not working for you. It's working for Bill Gates. And it's tracking and reporting in every little thing you do. And he's going to be able to take that data and subject it to analytics and monetize it and sell it to companies. Or use it himself. He had, within 5 years, there should be 415,000 low altitude satellites. Gates will own 65,000. He says that his 65,000 satellites alone will be able to look at every square inch of the planet 24 hours a day. There's no place to hide. The data analytics, the 5G does data analytics that allows them to harvest and monetize everything you do, but it also allows total surveillance. They connect with the satellites, they connect with the facial recognition system. They know where you are 24 hours a day, they know everything that you do. They follow you on your GPS, they look at all your transactions. At the same time, they're bringing in digitalized currency. And the purpose of digitalized currency is that they're going to be able to track, trace, and tax every transaction you do. And but also, they have programmable currency, which they use now in China. And the first use of it in the Western world was by Justin Trudeau, during the trucker strike, where if you disobey one of their mandates, like, let's say all of these powers they're taking, never going to give up. So they're saying, you know, the lockdowns are over. But they're reserving the ability to do a lockdown anytime they want and do masking, etc. So let's say they have a masking week, where everybody has to mask this week, and they see you on facial recognition. You're not wearing a mask, or you're supposed to be social distancing and you got too close to your girlfriend. They then can punish you the way that Justin Trudeau did without ever charging anybody with a crime, without ever convicting them. They can shut off your capacity to spend money. So they can tell you, okay, for the next 2 weeks you have to stay home and your credit card will only work at grocery stores stores within a half mile of your home. If you try to travel elsewhere, you can't buy gas, you can't buy an airplane ticket, you can't do anything else. That is total control population. Then they have the vaccine passports, which of course, like in China, will be attached to a social credit system. Oh, if you're a person that the government disapproves of, you speak out, if you don't comply, they then can punish you using their digitalized currency. So they have all these instrumentalities of control that they're putting in place now. And I call it turnkey totalitarianism, because they're building the whole system. And when they turn it on, it's going to be too late. At the same time, the resistance is growing, and it's growing exponentially. The conversions are always from them to us. People come over to our side, nobody goes back into the matrix. And we're essentially in an arms race today, where we're building the resistance fast enough that we can dismantle the system before they turn it on and put it in place. And that's really that's really the race that we're in right now. And we're getting these populations that are coming from we're not going to do it. And they're passing laws saying you can't do it. And the same thing is happening to some extent in Canada and in other nations in the world where there's a resistance point where they're actually putting safeguards in the law. The last thing that I'm going to leave you with is this. These rules that everybody should remember. Number one, that every power that the government takes, it will never relinquish voluntarily. The masking, the social distancing, the lockdowns, they may shut off for a temporary time, but they're going to hold on to them and they will use them against you whenever they want to. So we need to confront them and take those powers away from them. Number two, possible. This is a law of history, it's a law of human nature. If they're allowed to do something bad to you, they will do it ultimately. The third rule is that nobody has ever complied their way out of totalitarianism. Every time you are obedient, the bullies take that as a sign of weakness and a signal that they can impose some new humiliation, on you, some new task. And so, our duty is resist. And if you think, I'm not going to die on this hill thinking I need this and the other today, that you need to die. Because every time they back up, they get stronger and stronger. And we are as strong as we're going to get right now. And we need to hold the line until some of the other side begins to join us.
So much richness in that, and I wish we could talk for longer. You're going to come back tomorrow night, right? We'll carry on the conversation. I'm going to ask you one last quick thing, and you can make it very quick, and it's a little bit of a personal question, but I'm wondering, can you imagine if you were able to assemble for dinner all the family that you've lost over the last 50, 60, 70 years? What would that conversation look like, do you think? What would they say about our world? What would they say to you about your view, your stance?
I've made a practice my whole life of not speaking for my father, my uncles, or anybody else who has died. So, I think all of them were people who loved democracy, they loved freedom, they were people who mistrusted power, who understood that people in power lie. My father specifically told me that. He said, people in power lie, you have to remember that. And so I think that they understood that everybody has to, Our job in democracy is to approach power with skepticism and to keep asking questions and to keep our minds unclouded by fear or by any of the other alchemies of demagoguery that these autocratic elements, these oligarchs, use to control and disable the population.
I'm sure that you've left our audience, you've certainly left me with an awful lot to think about tonight, running the spectrum from COVID to government in general, to psychology, to morality, to just what we can do with our own minds. And as you say so eloquently and importantly, what is the hill to die on anyway? And if this is not it, then there isn't going to be another one, right? And I just thank you so much for your time and your ideas and for sharing them. And I think we're immensely grateful. So thank you, everybody. Can we give them a round of applause?
Looks like it's over. We're going to head to the back.
Thank you. Over the last several months, and every time I just feel so filled up, and ideas just resonate with me. And I feel so horrible that we're in a place in society where someone like that is just quickly called an anti-vax conspiracy theorist and dismissed, and he's not part of the conversation anymore. And I think that, as he says, we need to hold our ground and we need to resist, but we also need to realize that a multiplicity of opinions and ideas is a good thing, and that we get ourselves to very bad places when we forget that. And anyway, thank you so much to all of you for coming tonight. Thank you to Charles and Ryan and everyone at Canada Christian College for hosting us. Thank you to Democracy Fund for continuing.
Yeah, it looks like they're letting out, buddy.
And if you want to follow us, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter, which is the Democracy Fund. You can go to our website, democracyfund.ca, and you can follow me, Dr. Julie Pinessi, on Instagram and Twitter as well. So thank you so much. I think we have Ryan, we have Charles coming back out. So.
All right, we're going to go make sure the bubbles are loaded up.
Well, can everybody stand? And I just want to again thank you for being a warrior. This man tonight is challenging. This is not just a virus that
we're going to light up the bubbles. I have a feeling we're out of fluid. Yeah. So I hope that was fun. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to change the title. Yeah, sorry about that. I messed up the title a little bit. We'll get that sorted. And yeah, thanks for joining us here tonight. Church of Bubbles loves you. Share this out if you love it. And hey, I hope we see you soon. Yeah. Facebook, Instagram, all things Church of Bubbles. We love you, man. See ya. All right, I'm gonna put in some bubbles. I guess you guys can wait until I put in some bubbles, yeah? Un momento. There we go. You guys fall down? Sorry, man. Sorry, guys, I'm coming. You're on the floor. Sorry. Sorry. We'll go up top. Let you guys have a look. People coming out. Yeah. Bubbles flying, baby. Oh, damn, guys. Sorry, man. Yeah, I'm coming up, guys. So I hope you had fun. We're on top of the bubble bus, blowing some bubbles for the people letting out. All the people. Hey! Good day to be free, huh? So we're outside of the Canadian Democratic something or other. I think I want to get to know these guys. This is Ezra Levant, guys. Saw Dave Menzies here tonight.
Hey!
Hey! How are you?
How are you?
Great to see you.
You too. I wanted to tell you, but is your camera on?
Yeah, but I can, just give me a second. I'm gonna give you guys up here, and then I gotta go down, I gotta talk to some people. Yeah!
I've been watching you since Ottawa, bro. You know how long I want to meet you?
Hey, we met!
Oh my God! I rolled out of bed to just come here, and I missed it.
You didn't miss it, you're here!
I missed it!
No, you didn't! We haven't even started screaming freedom yet!
You have no idea!
I'm coming down, I'm coming down!
Oh my God, I don't know where to put this thing! Oh my gosh, sorry. Gotta put it somewhere. I just bought this because of this! Anyways, I wanted to tell you, we talked to my daughter's one. Right. Yeah, okay. So I wanted to tell you, you're moving. We're moving. Okay, do you know we're very famous? Bankrupt. Yeah, like that's the general
See you too.
I'll let you know. We'll let you have the thing on Saturday. All right. Well, I'll send you a message.
Russ that man, he's got a flag.
Oh my God!
Bubble fluid
Not far enough in.
Just had to say hey, you represent.
Yeah, but good to see you.
Oh my gosh!
Maybe I'm not considering.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it was entertaining.
I gotta give you a hug. Oh my
Yeah,
God!
I'm glad you came. That's awesome.
I went to come see you in Ottawa, but I didn't have a car.
I was walking by the parking lot where you guys were all set up. You had the little campsite and stuff. I was there with my brother from last week up to Sunday.
Oh,
And
cool.
I think so. I was up there like making videos. Not the level of some guys.
I mean, you know when you were parked over there and all the music was happening, I'm like, I hope you don't get cut off because all the music and all the partying. And,
I didn't strike me all
I
over.
know, I've
Anytime
seen.
you do that.
I hope.
Even I wish they could give me a button at the end so you can buy the tune. You know what I mean? Like give money to the artist, I'll do it.
Thanks for the bubbles.
Yay! Freedom!
Freedom!
I,
We know what that's
can I
really
get a snack
about.
if you guys don't mind? Thanks.
I can take it if you want.
If you could, that'd be awesome. Thank you very much. We're going to get that book.
I was hoping that we could get one from Travel Fun.
Oh.
You see they were giving away.
All right, brother. No, I didn't.
Yeah, they're giving away his book out there. Woo!
Just your everyday grandpa.
Again, thanks for what you did. No, not
I know.
man.
I know.
Just all of us. It was me. I just showed up. Thankfully, you did it. Yeah, they definitely.
Very good.
Okay, you guys have a great night.
No people.
See you guys.
Well, I certainly appreciated the videos and as much of yours and when Sherman was done, Brandon were down there and stuff. People right? So, I mean, there were lots of other ones too that I hooked into as well, but you know, you kind of start with who you know.